News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's writer and actor Yanis Morgan and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's presidential advisor says front lines have practically frozen because Russia doesn't have enough troops to make further advances. Meanwhile, Mariupol City Council says thousands of Ukrainians have been taken by force across the border to Russia. Fighting is still said to be going on in the city after an art school where around 400 people were taking shelter was also bombed. There's still no word on casualties, but the City Council confirmed that the building was destroyed and there were victims under the rubble. President Zelensky described the horror of the attack in an address to the nation.
The blockade of Mariupol will go down in history of responsibility for war crimes. To do what the occupiers did to a peaceful city is a terror that will be remembered for centuries to come. And the more Ukrainians tell the world about it, the more support we find. The more Russia uses terror against Ukraine, the worse the consequences will be for it.
Well, the former head of the British Army, General Sir Mike Jackson, told GB News he couldn't rule out the possibility of World War III, saying President Putin's objective is to rebuild the old Soviet Union.
It seems to me the only way that we can bring this dreadful war to an end is for Putin to accept that his original aims are unachievable.
In other news, police have arrested a man on suspicion of murder after the death of a teenager in central London. 22-year-old Maher Marouf was found in the Clerkenwell area following a manhunt. It's believed the Tunisian national had been in a relationship with 19-year-old Sabita Tanwani, who was found with serious neck injuries at her student accommodation yesterday. A woman has been charged with murder after a body was found buried in a back garden in Northampton. The remains are believed to be those of a missing 42-year-old man. Forensic officers and specialist search teams, including a cadaver dog, made the discovery during a search of a property. 48-year-old Fiona Beale was arrested at a hotel in Cumbria. She'll appear at Northampton Magistrates Court tomorrow. 6 people have been killed and 10 others seriously injured when a car ploughed into a crowd in Belgium. The incident happened in a small village about 30 miles south of the capital, Brussels. Police say the vehicle was driven at high speed into a group of carnival performers who were preparing for a parade. 2 people have been arrested. The incident's not thought to be terror-related. A member of the carnival troupe says the day was a disaster.
It was supposed to be a celebration day, but it turned out to be a tragedy. A car drove into the procession. We saw bodies flying everywhere. It was horrible.
Conservationists believe a huge fire that devastated a nature reserve on the Wirral was deliberately lit. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, which manages the reserve, is assessing the damage. Flames quickly spread across marshland at Parkgate yesterday evening, with firefighters extinguishing the blaze shortly before 7 o'clock this morning. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge will learn about efforts to preserve Belize's barrier reef as they continue their Caribbean tour. William and Kate spent time with the country's Prime Minister on day 2 of their 8-day trip, marking the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Their visit hasn't been without controversy. Some residents protested against the royal couple's arrival and helicopter landing site. And a toy company in Chicago has raised over £110,000 for Ukraine by selling President Zelensky Lego figurines. The unofficial Zlego toys went on sale with a price tag of £75 and sold out within hours. All funds from the sale will go towards medical aid for Ukraine. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to Nana Akua.
So good afternoon. It's just fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, I'm sick to my back teeth of hearing how slow we were in the UK to respond to the refugee crisis in Ukraine and how people are being racist, and if the people had been black or darker skinned, the response wouldn't have been as great. Comparing this war to others and how the British public don't respond in the same way to channel migrants and how the language is all wrong, that we're calling these people from Ukraine refugees and why not migrants, which in their eyes is a stigma. Comparisons of our so-called racism to Brexit, which is odd really, because as far as I can see, most people in Europe are white. So how does that fit in with the narrative that we are more welcoming because the people of Ukraine are also white? The media doing their whole doing down Britain thing and telling us how much better other European countries are because they didn't ask for visas. Well, I can tell you now, as a woman of colour and in my experience, some of those countries in Europe are the most racist I've ever visited. Look, I'm fed up of everything always ending up with the British public being called racists. You know what? Until parts of the mainstream media started shoving it down my throat, I hadn't even noticed that those fleeing the massacre in Ukraine were different in any way. All I saw was people being killed in the most abhorrent and senseless manner and for no real reason. Hardly the same as people, mainly men, fleeing the relative safety of France, having paid thousands to get on a dinghy to evade the law. How can you even compare the two? If we must be forced to look at this through the lens of colour, why have people barely noticed that the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, isn't white? And she's hardly going to make it impossible for others like her to get here, is she? She's inherited a system that needs major tweaking, and she's working on it. And given the constraints that she's under, I think she's doing a pretty good job. Boris Johnson's government, by the way, has the most diverse cabinet in history, something that still evades every other political party in this country, even now. And whilst we're at it, if those pumping out this nonsense are that bothered, how come they stayed silent when reports of racism at the borders was reported? Apparently people of colour weren't initially being allowed to leave Ukraine. They should have been shouting about this from the hilltops, but you didn't really hear much about it. Yes, we do all agree the forms were way too complicated. Asking for things like bank and mortgage statements from people fleeing a war zone, absolutely ridiculous. But to be honest, we in this country are renowned for our overcomplication of things. I mean, you only need to look at the civil service and the NHS. We do it to ourselves. So we're hardly going to change a habit of a lifetime for other people. Remember COVID and the rules? Too complicated by half. Even the Prime Minister couldn't fathom them. The 5 levels, the 3 tiers, we were all in tears by the end of that one. And we're currently awaiting the results of the Partygate questionnaire. I dread to think how complicated they made that. I sincerely hope by now that people have sensibly kicked that nonsense to the curb and we can focus on this incomprehensible humanitarian crisis. I imagine those creating the forms for the potential Ukrainian refugees have never entered a war zone before, and from their houses, which a lot of these civil servants are still working from, haven't a clue about war. And thankfully, most of us living now haven't either. Look, Over 150,000 people have opened their homes to the Ukrainian scheme to house a refugee. We are giving those who take on an individual or family £350 a month, and we were the first to step in to provide weapons for the Ukraine. Hardly the behaviour of racist people. I'm proud to be British, and I refuse to allow anyone to tell me otherwise. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. Now, every Sunday at 5 o'clock in Outside, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP, or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. And today, I'll be joined by a man who was tasked with leading over 140,000 army personnel and making key military decisions. The former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, will share his highs, lows and the career that he had and his vision and his thoughts on the invasion of Ukraine. The Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is nuclear power the way forward? Hinkley Point C is the first in a new generation of nuclear power stations being built in the UK. It'll provide zero carbon electricity for around about 6 million homes. But the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is reportedly unhappy with the Prime Minister's push to dramatically increase the number of nuclear power plants in Britain. So, is nuclear power the way forward? And on today's show, I posed the question, how do you fight a disinformation war? Well, it seems like the UK government is trying to do just that. A counter-disinformation team have been set up to reach Russian citizens to stop Russian propaganda. We'll discuss that with Foreign Affairs analyst James Marlowe. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Like the usual means, you can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me @gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome to my panel writer and actor Yanis Morgan and also broadcaster Danny Kelly.
Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Hi,
nice
Nana.
to see you. Have you had a haircut, Yanis, or something?
Well,
I had
Not you, not you. You ain't got any hair. You even
Danny
touching your head
stepped up.
for?
He's looking very smart today. I thought.
Is he? He looks the same as last time. I can't believe he even went to touch his hair. Have you forgotten?
it's called self-deprecating.
Is it really?
Yes, it is.
OK, well, I don't know about that, so that's fair enough. So, Yanis, how are you?
I'm very well. Good to be back.
And Danny, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Nana. Looking fabulous as always. Sorry for objectifying you. I know you're here on talent,
No,
but you also do look fabulous as
Thank
well.
you very much.
Your
I'm
routine
happy.
before the show as well.
Yes,
Anyone
my
follows you on Twitter?
Yeah, not many actually. It's not that many actually, but never mind. I don't care. Listen. So, what do you think then? This whole idea that I keep listening on the radio to different stations all across, and people saying, "Oh, well, why didn't we? How come we asked for visas? We're the only ones that asked for visas." And I mean, what's your view on all of this, Yanis?
I think initially they did make it very complicated.
Yes.
And one of the reasons the government were given were to stop Russia. If Russia sent anyone to obviously destabilise our country or do something here. But if Russia were to send anyone, they wouldn't do it via that route. They'll probably come with a passport, with another visa coming through. So that argument doesn't really hold
Really,
up.
you don't think so? They could do. Why not?
Because
Why
a
not?
lot of people who are more informed than me were giving this argument. I was listening to the debate, and they were saying typically they come through Poland and have a visa that way, and that's how they'd get into the country. So if that was the argument, I think we do need to make it easier. You posed such a good analysis when you were saying that in a war situation, you're not going to have access to the internet. You're not going to be able to get all these documents. So we need to make it as easy as possible.
Well, it was a bit ridiculous, some of the questions they were asking. But I'm not opposed to the idea that they should have a visa. I don't think that's a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with knowing who's coming in and out. Doesn't mean you're a racist for asking it, Danny. But what do you think?
Are you asking the question, are we racist because we've taken in so many white people compared to so many or comparatively fewer black or brown people coming over on a dinghy? If so, I believe that if we have opened up our 150,000 dwellings to Ukrainians, I do believe that number wouldn't be 150,000. I think it's natural for us to share characteristics and our culture with people from Europe, whereas you don't necessarily have those same cultural characteristics that you share with people maybe from Africa. Now, does that make you racist? I don't think it does make you racist.
No.
I really don't. I think it makes you fairly normal and everyday. That there is nothing wrong with wanting to live with like-minded fellow people. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's interesting you say that because you talk about like-minded, you talk about culture, but you also talk about colour. And I think that actually culture crosses over colour. So it doesn't matter what colour you are. It's more like what your culture is. So no. So I say this, for example.
Go on.
So my culture is British, right? If you put me in the heart of Africa, I don't know what's going on. I was there, I went to Ghana, and the first thing I asked for was ketchup. I said, where's the ketchup? I mean, the bread was foul. I was like, what? I can't eat this. Where are these ants coming from? You know, where on earth? It's too hot and I can't see. I couldn't open my eyes. That's the thing. The point is that my culture is very British. So I think that what we are doing, you know, I don't think there's any racism really involved in there. There might be for some people. Some people are racist. I can't defend those people. But there is a similar culture. So it's natural to sort of maybe, you know, feel more similarities with people who have a similar culture.
Correct.
To you.
And I don't think that's wrong.
But my point was that I'm sick and tired of hearing this narrative that, oh, well, it's really racist. If the people had been black, we wouldn't have. And I just don't think that was the case. I can identify more with the people in Ukraine for this particular instance than I can with people in Africa. And that's because I'm not looking at colour. I'm thinking of culture. The way they live. They live very similarly to us, and I can't imagine something like that happening in the United Kingdom. And it made me think about that sort of thing happening here.
And I wonder whether it's because it's on our quote-unquote doorstep and we could be on the precipice of a nuclear war and a third world war. I wonder whether this just focuses the attention. And because everyone's collective attention is focused, and they're more scared watching the TV than they were when Assad was killing his people in Syria. And I think it focuses, and I think we're looking through that prism, and I think maybe that makes people think more about welcoming
that's what I think.
Refugees.
And the other thing is, if you look at Brexit, most people in Europe are white. And we didn't, what you were like was too many people coming in simply because the jobs and this and that, and the whole, the globalisation wasn't really working out for the indigenous people in this country. And you know, they look the same as most people here.
Two things to point out. We talked about the colour in Ukraine. Let's say you do house a family. You can't dictate what colour of skin they're going to have when they come over. Obviously, there's a mixture of nationalities in the Ukrainian people, but predominantly they are white. Yeah, and equally we talk about Syria, and that was one I was thinking about, but it's a very different situation. Here you've got Russia invading a country where Syria, it was a civil war, and I know that it was a bit of a proxy war as well with Russia, and a lot of the tactics they use there, they're using in Ukraine. But I think the situation in Ukraine is unique.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the situation in Ukraine is different to a lot of the things we see. And in terms of welcoming migrants who are crossing via boats and dinghies, you know, coming across the channel, I don't really like that much. I think that there should be a proper route for them also to come to the UK as well. And if we could set that up, then that's what we're doing, and that's what we should do instead of saying we're less welcoming.
It's for people who really need help. A lot of people are coming over for economical reasons because they feel that they can help their family back home. I understand it, I sympathise, but in Ukraine, these people have no other choice. So they really need help. This isn't a question of them just wanting to come over here because they feel that they can earn more money to help their family out. It's a very different situation.
And there's so much double standards in the media. Everyone, all of these media big shots who are saying you're racist for voting Brexit, you're racist because you'll have a Ukrainian but you won't have a Somalian. You know, I really would like to see if they open their doors once they're off air. Well, I want to know if they are welcome. And I listen to the radio like you, and there are certain commentators who are quick to call you racist, and I really want to know whether they're welcoming a Ukrainian family.
Yeah, because if they're going to open their mouths like that, they should open their mouths the other way as well and explain themselves. But if you've just joined us, welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, the great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, is nuclear power the way forward? And Chancellor Rishi Sunak is unhappy with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson's push to increase the number of nuclear power plants in the United Kingdom. Nuclear is the world's second largest source of low-carbon power, and it's seen as a cheaper source of energy. But it's argued there's still environmental risk factors. So I'm asking, is nuclear power the way forward? Send me your thoughts now. GBViews at gbnews.uk, and tell me what you think of everything we're discussing at GB News. There's a poll up right now asking, is nuclear power the way forward? Cast your vote, but first, it's the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry and clear for many, though it will chill off after sunset. Let's take a look at the details. Firstly, in the far southwest, there'll be some more cloud around here this evening, and perhaps even the odd spot of rain, but that cloud will keep temperatures up. Over to the east, and a clear, calmer end to the weekend, though in any rural areas it will start to feel pretty chilly around dusk. Moving back to the west, and in South Wales, there'll continue to be hardly a cloud in the sky tonight, chilly here as well. Next now to the Midlands, where you can see the odd spot of fog and mist developing this evening, but otherwise a clear and cool end to the day after a sunny-filled weekend. Now moving further east, and there will be more cloud across northeast England this evening, and in coastal areas a chance of some very light rain, though inland it will also be pretty chilly. Whizzing over to Scotland now, chilly here, especially in the breeze, but staying clear and dry for all, with some mistiness developing at low levels. Finally, we go to Northern Ireland, where it has been a little cloudier so far today, and this evening it will remain mostly cloudy, but that does mean it won't feel too cold. By Monday morning, temperatures will have dipped across the UK, so it will be a clear and crisp start to the week, and that is how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's fast approaching 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and you can also watch us, don't forget, on YouTube. Right, so I'm still with my panel, actor and writer Yanis Morgan, and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Now, before the break, I was discussing how wrong I feel the inaccurate comments are that Ukrainian refugees have been offered more sympathy and support from the British public than other refugees because of the colour of their skin. And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Now, Michael says, Nana, you're spot on. It's got nothing to do with skin colour. It's all about their culture. We resonate with them more. Debbie says, Nana, the fact that the Ukrainians are real refugees fleeing war, the boatloads of fit young to middle-aged men looking for work are totally different. Yes, I happen to agree with you. Then they're coming from France, which is not a war-torn country, the last time I looked. Gavin says, I think a lot of it comes from its coverage on the news. We're constantly shown images of horror and brutality. It tugs at our heartstrings, so we're more open to accepting the Ukrainians. Thank you for that. Keep your thoughts coming, because, I mean, you know, other people might think it is, and it is based on colour, and, you know, also your views are also valid. Right, so it's now time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is nuclear power the way forward? Now, there are reports that Prime Minister and the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, are actually at loggerheads over this one. Boris's drive to increase the number of nuclear power plants is something that he's talking about. And one of those is Hinkley Point C. Now, that was the first in a new generation of nuclear power stations built in this country. It will provide zero-carbon electricity for around about 6 million homes, and there's also 4 other nuclear power stations proposed across the UK, including Oldbury, Sizewell and Bradwell. So with a cost of living crisis, I mean, you can see them on the map. Those are the locations. What do you think? I mean, all eyes are going to be on Rishi Sunak, his spring statement. We'll be seeing how he intends to combat this whole rising energy cost crisis and whether he's actually willing to invest in nuclear, which, from everything I've read, is extremely expensive at the start, but then cheaper as you go. So for the Great British Debate, I'm asking, is nuclear power the way forward? I'm joined now by the former CEO of Energy UK, Angela Knight. Angela, thank you so much for joining me. So, first of all, I mean, a lot of people hear, OK, nuclear power, nuclear power, nuclear power. But can you just explain to us how it's created? What's it all about?
Yes, well, nuclear power, the nuclear power that we have is fission. There's a lot of attempts to do fusion, but fission, that is splitting the atom. And in splitting it, a lot of heat is created. That heat then is turned into steam. The steam drives generators, and the generators generate electricity. And so you're not using fossil fuels. It's zero carbon. And one of the things that we have done here in the UK is had a very good experience of nuclear power. Our power stations have been running for a great many years. They've been reliable and they provided good, steady power. And as we look to the future, a lot of people quite rightly say, we'll build more wind. And of course, you can do that. The only issue with wind is it doesn't blow all the time. So you have to have the backup unless you just want to be out of power. And of course we don't. So if you're going to do the backup, the question is, what is it that you do it with? Gas is where we are at the moment. Slows down most of our coal. So the answer is nuclear.
Well, the answer, you say the answer is nuclear. And you talk about the fact that it's wonderful because it's, there's no zero carbon. But don't we use uranium to power a nuclear power station, which is mined in places like Niger and even Russia, actually? And then obviously where it's mined, apparently it's not dangerous, but it's the dust that comes off it that then irradiates everything around it and makes it quite volatile and dangerous for the environment. I mean, are we not going to consider that?
Yeah, absolutely have to. Because if you look at, you know, the supply chain, just like if you look at this for nuclear, you're absolutely right. You need Ukrainian. I believe the largest Ukrainian mine is, in fact, in Kazakhstan, not in Russia. But the point is nevertheless the point, that there is environmental questions about that, just as there's environmental questions actually about the wind turbines. You know, the whole supply chain has to be taken into account when one is considering exactly what it is the impact on the environment as we move through to on the net zero agenda. And you're absolutely right to raise it, because so often that supply chain is not discussed.
Yeah,
if we go to the end,
Angela, what about plutonium? So you've split the atom, you've got from the uranium, you've created the steam, as you said, and everything like that. When you finish, though, you wind up with plutonium. Now, that is another poisonous substance, isn't it, that has how many billion years of life? You have to put it somewhere to sort of keep it out of the way. What about that? Because that's a waste product. What can we use it in any way?
Well, at the moment, you're right. There's not vast piles produced. It's relatively small amounts. And at the moment, it's encased in glass and concrete, and it's buried safely in the ground. Do I think that that's the long-term view? Probably not. And one of the issues that has really come to the fore as a result of the cost of energy going up and the problems with gas and the wholesale market and all those things is that some of the questions that have been parked for many years are now coming out and being asked again. And the scientists are all working very hard on some of the outcomes that we need. I mean, the science and the technology is to some extent behind what is needed for meeting net zero at 2050. And I do believe that the politicians understand that. However, the very fact that whatever way we generate power, there's a consequence, environmental consequence in the building, then there's of it, and then there's environmental consequence with what do you do with it at the end, is there for all sorts. I'm not pushing it to one side, but it still leaves you with the question of what do we do? And of all the options of what do we do, it's coal, it's gas, or it's nuclear in order to back up the electricity produced by wind or indeed by solar, because those are intermittent, renewables are intermittent.
Yeah, and then the other thing is obviously they say that roughly the reserves of uranium are around about 80 years worth, which is a worry. And I know you said that there's not much waste because very little's produced, but if everyone's producing it, then that becomes a lot. It's like one person. If everyone drops something little, then there's a lot of waste.
And by the time that 80 years, in fact, by the time 10 or 15 years has elapsed, we will have other forms of the nuclear fusion, I'm sure, will be up and running. Because
what's the difference?
What I don't want to do, what I'm trying not to do, is I'm trying not to say to you there is a perfect solution. I'm trying not to say to you in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years there'll be alternatives. But what I am saying is there's a lot of work going in this area. We need to do some things right now without delay in order to give us the power that we need. But at the same time, work on the technology and the applied development and research so that new techniques come forward for the next 10, 15, 20, in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
I'm just going to say very, very briefly as well, because I know that it takes about 10, 15 years to build a nuclear power station. And then obviously we've had things like Chernobyl where there's accidents and most of them are human error. Yeah. So we can't sort of get out of the fact that there will be accidents. But you mentioned nuclear fusion. Can you briefly tell us what that is? What's the difference?
You'll need to go to the scientists for that. It's when you, instead of splitting the atom, it's when you push the atoms together and you get them to stick and heat is generated as a consequence. It's in the lab, it is considered to be doable and it's also considered to be safer. And I'm sure that we'll get there at some point in time. Unfortunately, it's still in the lab at the moment. I just want to make you one other point, though, about the time it takes to build nuclear stations and the size. The area which is not talked about and ought to be talked about more is the small-scale nuclear reactors. Rolls-Royce has been developing them, and you'll know that about a year ago, it said it could have 16 done by and installed and running by 2025. They're cheaper, they're more, and they're repeatable. You don't have these huge, great, big things that 20-odd billion that take 10, 15 years to build. They're repeatable, they're cheaper, and that, I think, is one of the areas which I sincerely hope that the politicians are going to be pushing when they come up with their energy strategy. And it, to a certain extent, will help the Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor's problem, because he's looking at huge, big amounts of money, large stations, long delays. These are a different calibre and a different kettle of fish altogether. Right. I think more attention needs to be paid there, and I hope that it will be.
Interesting. Well, thank you for all of that. That's great. Very, very informative. That's Angela Knight. She's a former CEO of Energy UK. Right, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. I'm asking, is nuclear power the way forward? Lee says, absolutely, categorically not. Spent fuel rods and pretty much the most dangerous thing on the planet. Yeah, David says, as it stands with literally millions of people about to start charging their cars, if we don't have 10 new nuclear power stations built pronto, then we'll be all sitting in the dark. I don't want to laugh, it's slightly funny. Alex says, modern nuclear power generation is incredibly safe and yields massive amounts of power. It just seems scary due to the historical reputation. That's true. I did hear that it's something like 6 billion times more power, 6 million times more power than electricity. And James says, zero carbon electricity from nuclear power, Nana. Nonsense. It takes around about 10 years to build a nuclear power station and 20 years to decommission one. That's a vast amount of energy use at a vast cost. Nuclear power is neither cheap nor environmentally friendly. We'll keep your thoughts coming. We'll hear the thoughts of my panel very soon. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the news, we'll continue with our great British debate. I'm asking, is nuclear power the way forward? You'll hear the thoughts from my panel, actor and writer Yanis Morgan, and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Pay attention. But first, it's the news headlines.
It's 4:33. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's presidential advisor says front lines have practically frozen because Russia doesn't have enough troops to make further advances. Meanwhile, Mariupol City Council says thousands of Ukrainians have been taken by force across the border to Russia. Fighting is still said to be ongoing in the city after an art school where around 400 people were taking shelter was also bombed. There's still no word on casualties, but the City Council confirmed that the building was destroyed and there were victims under the rubble. Police have arrested 22-year-old Maher Marouf on suspicion of murder following the death of Sabita Tanwani in central London. It's believed the Tunisian national was in a relationship with the 19-year-old student. She was found with serious neck injuries at her university accommodation in Clerkenwell yesterday. 6 people were killed and 10 others seriously injured when a car ploughed into a crowd in Belgium. The incident happened in a small village about 30 miles south of the capital, Brussels. Police say the vehicle was driven at high speed into a group of carnival performers who were preparing for a parade. 2 people have been arrested. The incident's not thought to be terror-related. Millions of people in England will begin to be offered COVID booster jabs this week. The NHS says the vaccine will be available to care home residents over the age of 75 and the immunosuppressed aged 12 and over. 5 million people are expected to be given the jab. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Nana Akua will be back in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
If you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, coming up at 5 o'clock, I'll be joined by someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job in Outside. And today, a man who was tasked with leading over 140,000 army personnel and making key military decisions. The former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, will share his highs, the lows, and the lessons learned, and what his thoughts are on the invasion of Ukraine. But first, let's get back to the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is nuclear power the way forward? Boris Johnson is becoming increasingly frustrated by Chancellor Rishi Sunak's resistance to increase the number of nuclear power plants in the UK. We generate currently around about 15 to 20% of our electricity from nuclear. But there's 4 new power stations proposed across the country and one already under construction at Hinkley Point. The site alone will provide zero carbon electricity for approximately 6 million homes. So with an energy crisis looming and a huge week ahead for the Chancellor as he prepares to make his spring statement, I'm asking, is nuclear power the way forward? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by writer and actor Yanis Morgan and broadcaster Danny Kelly. All right, Danny, because Yanis is looking around. I don't know what he's
still. Let's we need to get into this.
Danny,
which camera do we look at?
Not you.
He always
not
looks so
we.
good
Sorry. Excuse me. Danny, your views on nuclear. What do you think?
Oh, 100%. After
100% what?
100%. We should dive into nuclear after the Fukushima disaster, which was in Japan about 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. Angela Merkel decided to, as I understand, just shut down. Close the door to nuclear. Now look how reliant they are to that lunatic's gas and oil, Putin. Look how they have reacted differently to Great Britain, for example, when it comes to supplying arms. Right. At first, Germany, they didn't want to ruin that relationship. They said they were going to supply bulletproof helmets. How's that going to bring a helicopter down? Britain supplied anti-tank missiles, and that's, I believe, because Putin feels emboldened that certain countries are so reliant in this bitter winter. We're not experiencing a bitter winter here, but a bitter winter in Germany and the Ukraine on his gas that he can do what he wants. And I read the article in the Telegraph by Prime Minister Boris Johnson today, and the gist is that we need to, and forget the environment. You ask the average man and woman who's having to pay £200 a month just to keep the Alecki on, whether they care about environmental consequences. Forget all about that. People want here and now problems solved. And the fact that your guest said you could have nuclear power in 5 years is terrific news.
What about the drawbacks, though? I mean, you know, we've got to be careful. First of all, you've got byproducts like plutonium. You're not bothered about the waste.
No, because I believe experts can manage it. I'm not bothered about that at all, because experts know how to dispose of it and keep it safe.
Well, just as well you don't live near one of the uranium mines, then. Yanis?
I totally agree with Danny. Absolutely agree. Something needs to be done. Energy prices going through the roof. You look at nuclear energy, and as your guest said, Angela, we have to choose one form. Nuclear energy, it's got a small footprint, so a large plant, it was interesting what you were saying about Rolls-Royce with the mini plants, but a large plant, technically the footprint would be 1 mile square, whereas to yield the same amount of power with wind, it's 360 times bigger, the footprint. With solar energy, it's 75 times bigger. You've also got high yield as well from nuclear power, and it is zero carbon. So it's got a lot of things going for it. We have to figure out ways to make sure that, obviously, the waste of plutonium is dealt with safely. That can be managed. The only thing is there's large upfront cost, and looking at Hinkley, we're forgetting that who's the money behind that? It's China. So that was, I think I'm right in saying that. I'm dragging that from my memory bank, so forgive me if I'm wrong. But who's going to be funding these larger plants? We need to be conscious of that.
Are you going to be quite happy for one next door to your house?
If that's the case.
Oh, you would.
Well, you're saying that...
I'm a NIMBY. I'm an old bloke, not in my backyard.
Yeah,
no.
OK, right. You see, this is the thing, isn't it? Yeah, we need all this. Yeah, we should do it. Yeah. OK, well, they've got to go somewhere. One right next to your house.
It'll be a rural area.
Well, it might be a rural area, but you could live in the
rural.
Yeah, but you could live in that rural area. Remember, it's nuclear power that we're talking about here.
What are you worried about?
I'm not worried.
That's what I'm saying. If it was in your
No, but
backyard,
NIMBY's not in my backyard. So
no, that's right. But
he doesn't want it next door to him.
I wouldn't want it.
It's great, but he doesn't.
I do. I think it's brilliant, but I wouldn't want to live next door to it. No. I'm just being honest.
But Yanis is quite happy to irradiate energy.
Are you?
Well, look, we're saying it's safe. If it wasn't safe,
well, no. You know, listen, nuclear power, of course, there are levels of safety, but but it's not. I mean, you know, if you're going to be living near a nuclear power station, I can bet your bottom dollar there's going to be more radiation around your house.
Do you remember the advert? Was it the Ready Brek kid?
Who's glowing.
Who literally had a nuclear halo as he went to school in the middle of winter. Now, listen, France has over 40 nuclear sites.
Yes, right.
But they have very little natural resources. They don't have much coal and they don't have much gas, certainly. And 44, I think. Now, it's a bigger country, but I think probably the same amount of people. Maybe we've got a few more million. And they don't have this conversation. They put their trust in the experts. You asked me about plutonium or uranium or the disposal
plutonium,
of it.
which is the byproduct. So uranium, they mine uranium, and that's what feeds the plants.
An expert on it.
So, I've been reading all about it. I've been reading everything. So I've looked at it, and I like the idea that it's zero carbon and all this thing. But what I'm saying is, are we getting rid of one thing that we're saying, it's terrible, carbon is terrible, to replace it with something that will end up being worse? Bear in mind, we have coal, we have other sources of energy that we could be using.
This is going to be, we need to figure out,
gas as well.
We need to have an energy strategy, and we talked about this on previous shows. I think for the next 100 years, as an energy strategy to sort us out and not be so reliant on countries like Russia or Saudi Arabia, I think nuclear power is a way forward.
You know that nuclear power is also one of the countries that supplies uranium as well, which powers these things. Not that we buy it off them, but they do have quite
and that
Russia
have nuclear energy.
They have uranium mines where you would mine the uranium to power the nuclear power plant. So like they have oil, like they have that.
There's got to be other countries that have it.
Well, no, but I'm just saying they are one of them. Just bearing in mind. Well, have a look. This is the map where there'll be. Let's see. Where have we got? We've got.
This is like an eye
very
test.
little up north. I know it's an eye test.
It's an eye test of the opposition.
Yeah, it's far away from us in the studio. I've got to say it out loud to people on the radio as well. But there are lots of different locations for the nuclear power stations.
One of which is Albury, which is in the Black Country, in the Midlands, and that isn't a rural area.
Exactly.
That's a heavily populated area. But maybe you would have to have it like a mile out of town or something. I am a classic NIMBY, definitely.
One thing we need to discuss is nuclear energy is not renewable. So uranium, and you talked about the mining process.
Yeah, so we've only got about 80 years left, apparently, of our reserves of uranium.
That price is going to go up, like anything. So when it starts reducing, and obviously it's more limited, the price.
But Yanis, if there's only 80 years left, hopefully in 80 years' time, we'll all be dead. But in 80 years' time...
Well, I might still be here. We might have worked out that...
I bet you haven't even aged a day in 80 years.
If there was a pill that said you could live forever, I'm sorry, but I'd take it.
But we'll have renewables by then, won't we?
Yeah,
80 years'
that's
time.
what I'm saying. Short term, right now, to see us through, and then hopefully in 80 years, 100 years, then we would have changed our energy strategy.
Well, what about natural disasters? And what about, because you saw what happened with Fukushima, what about stuff like that? Or accidents? You saw what happened with Chernobyl. Those places are literally places that are ghost towns. You can't really go around there. And you've got to be very careful. These things stay radioactive for many, many years.
I would draw your attention to my earlier comment about France, that has over 40 nuclear power stations.
Yes.
And we've been using nuclear power since the 1970s. OK, so accidents and incidents are very few and far between. And you need to balance.
But they're extremely costly for the environment. I mean, I can balance that, but I'm just thinking about the mining of uranium. Of course, you're going to have to mine more. The fact that it's only really going to last about 80 years anyway, as far as we can see. I'm thinking about the fact that there could be an accident or a mistake. Most of the nuclear incidents have been caused by human error. And then there's, of course, natural disasters, which I know everything's susceptible to that. You can't control against. But with nuclear power, if there is a natural disaster, it's extremely difficult to counteract anything that happens as a result of that.
Big if. And also, Angela, your guest, was saying there are no easy answers here. We have to do something. So I think this is definitely the lesser of the evil.
Well, some people manage to somehow recycle rubbish and make that into energy, but that's mainly Danny. But
it's that verbal rubbish.
But this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voice, your opportunity to be on the show and tell us your thoughts on the topics we're discussing. Nigel is here from Blackpool. Nigel, thank you so much for joining us. Nigel, what's your view then? Do you think nuclear power is the way forward?
Well, I think anything nuclear is very scary, but it's even more scary thinking we have no electricity or power. We'd be in trouble then, wouldn't we? I think we need to go forward and build them, but could we build them, I don't know, in way out places, little islands, or anywhere we've got them, just keep it away from major towns and cities if we can. So that's perhaps look at other kinds of power sources, for the gas and coal and the wind farms. With a lot of coastal area, can we do wave things? I think give the scientists and engineers a lot more money and see what we can come up with, and everything follows from them, doesn't it? So go forward with it.
Yeah, Nigel, I hear you. I'm with you. Give them more money. You saw what the scientists did with COVID. They got a so-called vaccine in a short space of time. Nigel, thank you so much for joining us. That's Nigel Alderson. He's there in Blackpool. Right, so that's what Nigel thinks. He's pretty much saying that,
Build one in Blackpool.
No, he said not next to him, somewhere else.
We have to divest ourselves. So as a strategy, this is part of the strategy. So we're not saying to dismiss wind farms or solar, but I think that this is a place in the scheme going forward for energy.
In 2014, Putin, that lunatic, annexed Crimea.
Yeah.
The West didn't do anything about it because he stopped there, and the West knew that we were dependent on his energy. And Putin knew that. The guy, although a lunatic, is a master strategist. We need to remove that leverage he has against us.
Well, I agree.
We really do.
I agree with you, but I don't think he's a master strategist. I think we were foolish, and I actually think that we were naive. For me, I have always said that we shouldn't outsource things like energy. I don't think we should be outsourcing water. I don't think that we should always control things like power. And I have no idea when other things like British Gas and things were sold off to other people and around the world. I just thought that that's really silly. And we should own it. We should own it, quite simply, because it's absolutely the lifeblood of us as human beings to survive.
May I suggest why you're wrong about him not being a master strategist?
I don't think he's a master strategist. That's just my view. I'm not wrong.
I know, but I think you are, and I think it's obvious. Because,
well, no, I don't think I am. I think that.
Let me explain why. Because we didn't do anything about it in 2014.
Well, that's our fault, though. That's what I'm saying.
That's right, but he knew this.
But that doesn't make him a master strategist. To me, it's quite obvious that if you give people power, as in literally the power to control your environment. I mean, have you seen Total Recall? You only need to watch that film once to know. I mean, they cut off the air to Mars. That was the end of them. Right, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Oliver says we should be investing in more renewable energy. The waste produced by nuclear, while small, is very dangerous. This was my point. I'm with you, Oliver. Yes, it is small, but lots of it becomes very dangerous. Liam says it makes no sense to start building nuclear power stations when we can just stop. We could open up fracking sites today. There is that, and I know we also have coal, but we're going for this zero carbon thing, so that's why we're not using that. Paul says, while cleaner alternatives are developed, fourth-gen reactors are safe as long as fully nationalised right the way through design and construction. Alternative types of reactor exist that produce less spent fuel rods. That is a very good point that he's making, isn't it? Paul makes a very, very good point, because we don't want to be outsourcing this, or we get the power station and we sell it off in some sort of privatisation nonsense. I think we need to keep control of it this time. We'll just keep those views coming at GB News. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. After the break, I'll be joined by Foreign Affairs analyst James Marlowe. We'll discuss disinformation in Russia and whether there's a peaceful way out of the conflict. We'll be back in a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's currently 53 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua on TV, online and on digital radio. This is GB News, and it's now time for the part of the show where we discuss some of the stories that impact countries around the world and how they might affect us here in the UK. Now, on the agenda, we've got a question I posed on the show yesterday. How do you fight a disinformation war? Because it seems like the UK government is trying to do just that. A counter-disinformation team have been set up by the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss to reach Russian citizens to stop Russian propaganda. So I'm joined in the studio now by Foreign Affairs analyst James Marlowe. James, thank you very much for joining me. Right, so James, talk to me about this disinformation task force and tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, I have to tell you, from my point of view, I have a Facebook account and a Twitter account, and I never ever block anyone. But in the last day, I've had to block several people with regard to this disinformation. I was fine with regard to various other wars and with regard to the pandemic, but this insistence, the disinformation is coming from two main angles. One of them is that they're backing Putin and they're backing Moscow because Ukraine is full of neo-Nazis. That's one issue. The second issue is that NATO is right, or the USA, as I was told by somebody from Canada this morning, is right on the border of Russia. What would you do? Wouldn't you do something about it? So let's just clear that up, just perhaps for our viewers and also for the sake of this disinformation. Right. With regard to the neo-Nazis, almost every single country has a pact of neo-Nazis in their country. Here in Great Britain, we have neo-Nazis. In the United States, they're in almost every single state. In Canada, they have them in Russia. Let's remember, Russia, the Soviet Union, actually allied itself with Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party to carve off Poland. Now, they are talking about a certain military unit inside the Ukrainian army that, according to Wikipedia, and I know that it's not necessarily truthful, but they say between 10 to 12% of that particular unit is full of neo-Nazis. Now, let's just double that figure for the sake of it. Let's say 25%. OK, we know that in the British Army, you have some racists, you have some anti-Semites.
You've got racists everywhere in any form, in any place, so you can't really get rid of that. That, unfortunately, is the way life seems to be.
And that is not enough reason for Putin to invade an independent country and to start bombing residential areas. That's one area.
It's very odd because there isn't any reason why anyone should be allowed to do that, and it's just unbelievable that the Russians appear to be accepting that. It just something doesn't really wash with me on that. I find that a bit disconcerting.
The second issue is I'm told that America is right on the border of America. America is right on the border of Russia, I should say. Now, America is not on the border of Russia.
No, it's not.
It's NATO, which is close to the border. Now, NATO is a pact of 30 countries, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, I think signed in 1945 or 46, right after the Second World War. They have absolutely no record whatsoever of ever invading anyone anywhere.
They're being told.
It's a simply defensive, whereas the Soviet Union, USSR, Russia has a track record of invading countries. The only reason why NATO is there is simply just to defend. It's not to attack, and it's never gone on the offensive. So that's where we have to really throw lines right through this misinformation area. But if I may just turn very quickly to the war, and that is today is day number 25. It is quite extraordinary how the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian people are entrenched deep down into their trenches, muddy trenches, I should say. The snow is no longer there. It's still freezing conditions. And I never expected that they would hold out this long. Certainly military experts around the world never expected they would hold out this long. I think one of the reasons is because their president, Zelensky, has instilled in them enough courage and confidence and inspired them with their backs to the wall to fight against this marching, massive Russian army coming into the country. Now, there's three different stages over here. I'll do this very, very quickly. Stage number one is that initially there was a huge amount of Russian troops, 25 days ago, tanks, artillery, armoured vehicles that came into the country. Many of them were inexperienced. They were told, you're going into Ukraine, training exercise, you're going to be met with dancing and flowers and kisses and love. The Ukrainian people are going to love you. Of course, they used our N-law anti-missile, I say our British N-law anti-tank missile system to take out hundreds of tanks. The Americans supplied them mostly with the Javelin anti-tank missiles. A lot of the armoured vehicles and the tanks were taken out through this. The Russians have lost several thousand soldiers so far. It's terrible.
Well,
young soldiers, their sons, some of them,
some of them are
brothers.
behaving in a manner that is disgraceful, even when they, you know, I mean, there's awful shots of them, you know, killing somebody walking past a tank. I mean, it's just not good. It's not good at all.
That's stage one.
Very briefly, can you take me to the peace talks? What's happening? Is there anything going on? Last thing I heard was a 15-point plan. You've got about 30 seconds.
There's no 15-point plan.
No.
If you understand who Vladimir Putin is, and I've been following him, I've been covering him and Russia for another network for the last 10 years. I've got to know how the man works, how he thinks. I had lunch in Israel several years ago with one of his people to find out about how he works. His whole objective is to take countries to expand the Russian Federation, and the reason for that is because that the biggest defeat, the biggest humiliation for Russia was in 1991 when the Soviet Union fell. He is not going to give up Ukraine.
No, I think you're right there as well. Well, thank you very much, James. James Muller, Foreign Affairs Analyst. Well, let's have we've got a little bit of time before the headlines to share some of your thoughts on the Great British Debate this hour. I've been asking, is nuclear power the way forward? Lots of you have been saying quite a few things. Paul says, since the UK is surrounded by water, I would have thought the water power would be a better choice. Simon says, well, we should just focus on wind and tidal energy, not wasting money on expensive nuclear pet projects. Des says we should invest and be more dependent on hydrogen. Nuclear isn't the answer. Thank you for that. Great thoughts, great views. You're watching me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. It's 5 o'clock, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. President Zelensky has compared the Russian invasion of Ukraine with Nazi Germany's final solution to exterminate the Jews in a video addressed to Israel's Knesset. He says Israel will have to live with its choices. Meanwhile, Mariupol's city council says thousands of Ukrainians have been taken by force across the border to Russia. Fighting is still said to be going on in the city after an art school where around 400 people were taking shelter was also bombed. There's still no word on casualties, but the city council confirmed that the building was destroyed and there were victims under the rubble. President Zelensky described the horror of the attack in an address to the nation. Former head of the British Army General Sir Mike Jackson told GB News he couldn't rule out the possibility of World War III, saying President Putin's objective is to rebuild the old Soviet Union.
It seems to me the only way that we can bring this dreadful war to an end is for Putin to accept that his original aims are unachievable.
In other news, police have arrested a man on suspicion of murder after the death of a teenager in central London. 22-year-old Maher Marouf was found in the Clerkenwell area following a manhunt. It's believed the Tunisian national had been in a relationship with 19-year-old Sabita Tanwani, who was found with serious neck injuries at her student accommodation yesterday. A woman has been charged with murder after a body was found buried in a back garden in Northampton. The remains are believed to be those of a missing 42-year-old man. Forensic officers and specialist search teams, including a cadaver dog, made the discovery during a search of a property. 48-year-old Fiona Beale was arrested at a hotel in Cumbria. She'll appear at Northampton Magistrates Court tomorrow. 6 people were killed and 10 others seriously injured when a car ploughed into a crowd in Belgium. The incident happened in a small village about 30 miles south of the capital, Brussels. Police say the vehicle was driven at high speed into a group of carnival performers who were preparing for a parade. 2 people have been arrested. The incident's not thought to be terror-related. A member of the carnival troupe says the day was a disaster.
It was supposed to be a celebration day, but it turned out to be a tragedy. A car drove into the procession. We saw bodies flying everywhere. It was horrible.
Conservationists believe a huge fire that devastated a nature reserve on the Wirral was deliberately lit. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, which manages the reserve, is assessing the damage. Flames quickly spread across marshland at Parkgate yesterday evening, with firefighters extinguishing the blaze shortly before 7 o'clock this morning. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge will learn about efforts to preserve Belize's Barrier Reef as they continue their Caribbean tour. William and Kate spent time with the country's Prime Minister on day 2 of their 8-day trip, marking the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Their visit hasn't been without controversy, with some residents protesting against the royal couple's arrival and helicopter landing site. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Nana Akua.
So good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and throughout this show I'm joined with my panel and we'll be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion, mine, theirs and of course yours. We'll be debating, discussing and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster Danny Kelly and writer and actor Yanis Morgan. Still to come in a few moments, I'll be joined by a man who's had tasked with leading over 140,000 army personnel and making key military decisions. The former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt. He'll share his highs, lows and lessons learned throughout his career, and we'll ask him his view on the invasion of Ukraine. We'll take a look at what he's been doing outside the army. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should the UK block foreign aid to countries who are still supporting Russia? India received £55.3 million worth of foreign aid from the UK last year, but has just bought 3 million barrels of aid from Russia, despite their invasion. So I'm asking, should the UK block foreign aid to countries that are still supporting Russia and arguably funding their war? And we'll debate whether sport has lost its integrity, the art of competition. When swimmer Leah Thomas competed as a man before her transition 2 years ago in the ratings, she was just outside the top 500. But this week, she won the women's 500-yard freestyle event in Atlanta and is dominating the women's game. So is allowing trans athletes to compete in women's sport ruining the art of competition? You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk or why not tweet me at gbnews. So let's start this hour by taking a look back at the career of one of the biggest names in the British Army in outside, General Lord Richard Dannatt. He was in charge of around about 140,000 army personnel, making key decisions for 3 years and was known as being the soldier's soldier. During his time as the head of the British Army, he campaigned for a better deal for troops, arguing for improved equipment and higher pay. He served in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, in Bosnia and in Kosovo. Lord Dannatt has also advised the government on defence and continues to share his experience with other organisations to this day. I'm very pleased to say that Lord Dannatt joins me now. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Firstly, good afternoon. Very, very happy to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I wanted to talk to you about the army because a lot of people look on it and think, oh, don't fancy doing that. What was it that drew you to join it? And what's your kind of backstory? Tell us a bit about you.
Well, it was something towards the end of my time at school, back in the 1960s, that I quite hankered after doing. But those older and wiser than me said, I think actually you ought to go to Cambridge, read law and be a barrister. Anyway, cut a long story short, having been invited to go to Cambridge for an interview, I made a complete fool of myself at the interview So I didn't go to Cambridge. I went to Sandhurst in September 1969 and I joined the army. And I thought probably that would be for 3 to 5 years. Well, I enjoyed it. It worked out pretty well. It suited me. And I stayed for 40.
A lot of time to be there. What was it about it that kept you there?
Well, I think there's a huge amount of job satisfaction as far as the army is concerned. If you're a people person and like being with other people, and particularly if you have the privilege of being a commander, in those days, right back in 1971 when I first commissioned, I was a second lieutenant, so I was in command of a platoon of about 30 green-haired soldiers from the northeast of England. It was a real privilege to lead other people on operations. As soon as I left Sandhurst, within a month, I was on the streets of Northern Ireland commanding soldiers in the very difficult days in the early 1970s. And you very immediately tested yourself, you tested your courage, you tested your skills of leadership, and it was a very exciting thing to do and very satisfying. And that feeling continued over the 20, 30, ultimately 40 years that I was in the army. And people ask me today, well, the army's a lot smaller. Would you advise your son or daughter to go into the army? And I'd say absolutely yes, because there are problems in the world. We don't go to places where things are going well. We go to things when places are not going well. And the job satisfaction that you get of trying to make a difference, trying to make an improvement, is hugely satisfying, and you get a great degree of job satisfaction from that kind of thing.
See, now most people listening would think that going into a war zone wouldn't be something that they would want to do, and that they couldn't see where they might get the satisfaction out of that. But as you look on to the Ukraine situation, what in your mind do you think those soldiers, either fighting for Russia or Ukraine, what goes through your mind when you're in a war zone like that?
Well, I'll take you back, actually, just to situation in Bosnia in 1995. I was Commander of British Forces at the end of the Bosnian Civil War. And the Dayton Peace Agreement, which was signed in December 1995, concluded a ceasefire agreement. It concluded a program for the future. And I remember going into a Serb village. We'd never operated in this area of Bosnia before. And I was talking to a group of old men, and I told them, the fighting has ended, the war has ended, the peace has come. And those old men cried. And you know, it's a really powerful emotion when old men cry. And that was a huge sense of satisfaction of, yes, soldiers are trained to fight, we're trained to end wars through fighting, but actually to end wars through negotiation, trying to bring a peace together, hugely satisfying. And of course, that's what's got to happen in Ukraine. Let's face it, whatever Vladimir Putin intended to do, whatever view he had of the capabilities of his Russian army, they've been proven to be not as effective as he thought. Their strategy of a lightning strike from Belarus down to Kyiv has not happened. And the Ukrainians have fought terribly effectively with great determination for the peace and freedom of their own country. So this, rather like Bosnia and other conflicts, has got to end around the negotiating table. And the sooner a third party, whether it's the Turks, the Israelis, the Chinese, and any of those are possible parties, can bring the Ukrainians and the Russians together around the negotiating table, the better, to try and find a negotiated way to end this, to stop the end of the killing, so much the better.
I mean, it is horrendous. Just looking at it, thinking that this doesn't feel like an actual thing that is happening, and it really is. You know, you see this sort of thing, you think, oh, well, it's somewhere else, and it's not. But actually, this is happening now. Right now, people in Ukraine are being terrorised by this war, which doesn't really make any sense at all. Now, you have been in different war zones, so you'll know the experience of this sort of conflict. How does it end? You talked about peaceful talks, and you're saying, but what sort of peaceful talks do you think that they could, what kind of agreement do you think might work?
Well, that's the big issue. There's got to be compromise on both sides. The Ukrainians will have to compromise to a degree, and Vladimir Putin will have to compromise. I think President Zelensky of Ukraine is already signaling that Ukraine will give up its ambition to become a member of NATO, and that is probably right, given the historic linkage that most Russians have had with Ukraine. Most Russians think that Ukraine is part of Greater Russia. So for Ukraine not to join NATO, most Russians would think that is right. But then what are the Ukrainians also going to have to give up? There's the eastern republics, Donetsk and Luhansk, which actually in anybody's book are certainly Russian-speaking. They're very much orientated towards Russia, but is that something that the Ukrainians are prepared to do, prepared to give up those two republics to Russia? And then, of course, you look at the south of the country, where through Russian force of arms, eventually Crimea, which was annexed in 2014, they've now fought their way to probably creating a land bridge from Crimea through the Donbass into Russia. Is this going to be a status quo? Is this going to be part of the future? Will Crimea and the Donbass be part of Russia? These are aspirations of the Russians. Are the Ukrainians prepared to give those things up? So there's going to have to be a lot of give and take on both sides. And without give and take on both sides, the fighting is going to continue. Putin may have thought that a lightning strike from Belarus to Kyiv would have ended the war in a few days, and he could have a regime change in Ukraine. That's not happening. Their war of maneuver has failed. They're now into a war of attrition, creating huge casualties amongst the Ukrainian population. How much longer can this go on? I hope and pray it doesn't go on for too much longer. So there's got to be give and take on both sides sooner, hopefully, rather than later.
Yeah, really, we were all praying for that. Now, I want to talk more about you, though, because you took on the top job. I mean, you were the head of the British Army. That's a big feat to be doing it's a massive job. That's a big responsibility. Talk to me about the moment of what it was like heading up the army for this country.
Well, it's a huge responsibility. It's a huge privilege. It's a huge honour. At the time I took over the job in 2006, it was a very difficult period. We were engaged in the operations in Iraq, and we were engaged increasingly in the operations in Afghanistan. And the way the army had been organised and resourced following the Tony Blair Defence Review of 97-98, just a few years before, was that we were resourced and organised to conduct one operation like that, not two. So we were under huge pressure. And I felt it was absolutely my responsibility to say to the Secretary of State for Defence, to say to the Prime Minister, look, we'll do whatever you want. You're the elected government of the day, but just give us the resources, give us the tools, and we will do the job. But you're asking us to do two major operations. We're only really resourced to do one, so just give us a bit more. The frustration thing from my point of view was I just didn't seem to be able to get that message across. And so I'm afraid at a time when too many people were leaving the army because sergeants and corporals and captains, their families were saying, look, this is just going on for too long, too much pressure. They were leaving and our manpower was going down. I knew I had to do something about it. So if I couldn't get the authorities to agree, I decided to talk more publicly in the media and gain a bit more popular support for that. And whether that was the right thing to do or not, I think will still be something I'll contemplate to my dying day. But at least it said to those in the army, the families of those in the army, those who just cared about our army, actually, the new boss understands the issues and he knows we're under pressure and he's doing something about it. And that was hugely important for the morale of the armed forces at the time. Anyway, fast forward, we carried on. We completed the operations in Iraq. We eventually completed our combat operations in Afghanistan. Yes, I know last year Afghanistan ended in a most unfortunate fashion. That's another story. But I believe I did the best that I could in trying to lead the army in difficult times. Was I right? Well, maybe the history books will show. I've written a couple of books. People can read them and they can judge for themselves. But it was a great privilege and an honour to serve for 40 years in the British Army, to lead wonderful soldiers in the British Army. And it was my privilege and pleasure to do that.
Well, I mean, it's been an amazing career. I've read a lot about you. But now what are you doing then? Because you've left the army, you've retired. You said you've written a few books. What else is happening with you?
Well, when I first left the army, I was constable of the Tower of London. So we lived in the Tower of London, and I was responsible to the Queen for the running of the Tower of London. That was a largely honorary and ceremonial appointment. And of course, I also went into the House of Lords in 2011 and have enjoyed the privilege of being part of our legislature, commenting on government issues, keeping the government of the day up to the mark, and participating in lawmaking. Perhaps in more recent years, what's been pretty challenging was that I now chair the National Emergencies Trust. The National Emergencies Trust was set up after the Manchester Arena bombing and the Grenfell Tower fire. Those events happened in 2017, when the public was hugely generous, but not all of their generosity went where it should have gone. There was a certain amount of fraud. And the Charity Commission challenged the major charities in that sector to say, you've got to come up with a better formula for the future. Cut a long story short, the National Emergencies Trust was formed. I was invited to be the independent chairman of that. And then come the pandemic, on the 18th of March 2020, we launched our coronavirus appeal, quite quickly raised just short of £100 million, which we distributed right around the country, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, through 15,000 grants to charities and community groups. And that was a huge challenge. Doesn't take very long to say it. It took a heck of a lot of doing. And that's a challenge which I and my team have thoroughly enjoyed rising to. So that's a kind of flavour of some of the things I'm doing at the present moment.
Oh, no rest for the wicked. This is not retirement. What are you doing? Well, listen, it's been...
I do play golf, not as well as I should. I enjoy fishing, not as often as I would like. But and my wife is Lord Lieutenant of Norfolk. She's the Queen's representative in Norfolk, where we live. So I enjoy supporting her. I run the family farm in Norfolk. We've got 4 children and 10 grandchildren and 3 dogs. So actually, I'm quite busy. But
you're busy still.
Frankly, moss doesn't grow on a falling stone. So I'm quite happy to be busy.
Well, listen, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, Lord Dannatt. Thank you so much for sharing your story with me. Thank you so much.
Sure.
That is, of course, General Lord Dannatt. He's the former Chief of General Staff for the British Army. What an incredible man. If you've just joined me, where have you been? There's still quite a lot to come. It's coming up to 20 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Today, joining me, my panellists, writer and actor Yanis Morgan and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Coming up, it's the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should the UK block foreign aid to countries who support Russia? India received £55.3 million worth of foreign aid from the UK last year, but has just bought 3 million barrels of oil from Russia despite their invasion of Ukraine. So I'm asking, should the UK block foreign aid to countries who support Putin? First, let's get some weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry and clear for many, though it will chill off after sunset. Let's take a look at the details. Firstly, in the far southwest, there'll be some more cloud around here this evening, and perhaps even the odd spot of rain, but that cloud will keep temperatures up. Over to the east, and a clear, calmer end to the weekend, though in any rural areas it will start to feel pretty chilly around dusk. Moving back to the west, and in South Wales, there'll continue to be hardly a cloud in the sky tonight, chilly here as well. Next now to the Midlands, where you can see the odd spot of fog and mist developing this evening, but otherwise a clear and cool end to the day after a sunny-filled weekend. Now moving further east, and there will be more cloud across northeast England this evening, and in coastal areas a chance of some very light rain, though inland it will also be pretty chilly. Whizzing over to Scotland now, chilly here, especially in the breeze, but staying clear and dry for all, with some mistiness developing at low levels. Finally, we go to Northern Ireland, where it has been a little cloudier so far today, and this evening it will remain mostly cloudy, but that does mean it won't feel too cold. By Monday morning, temperatures will have dipped across the UK, so it will be a clear and crisp start to the week, and that is how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that has been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's fast approaching 25 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. It's now time for our Great British Debate. And this hour, I'm asking, should the UK block foreign aid to countries who support Russia? In 2020, the UK government spent £14.5 billion on humanitarian assistance, with Ethiopia, Nigeria, Somalia, Afghanistan and Yemen receiving most of the money. But despite not being in the top 5, India still receives £55.3 million in aid, and they received that last year. Yet they've bought 3 million barrels of oil from Russia, even though they've invaded Ukraine. So I'm asking, if countries like India and arguably China too, who are yet to condemn Russia's actions, continue to support Putin's war machine, should we block foreign aid to those countries? Well, get your thoughts in. I'm joined now by the Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society, Dr. Alan Mendoza. Alan, I didn't know you had a doctor in front of you. No, I've never said that before. Dr. Alan, firstly then, how do the government decide where the foreign funds should go in the first place?
Well, it's normally done on a project basis, a needs basis. You look at what areas you want to be supporting, and then you allocate funds accordingly. There'll be complicated procedures for, kind of analysing need, analysing the best way the money can be spent, analysing whether XYZ scheme enables you to tick your own boxes internally with the bureaucracy, and then you submit. You actually choose, obviously, where you put the money to.
Giving it to India, I mean, haven't they got their own space project going on? They're doing pretty well in terms of their economy. What is the reasoning for that country being on the list?
Well, you'll have to ask, obviously, the bureaucrats in charge to work that one out. I agree with you. It seems ridiculous that when India is lavishing money on things that are not related to development with its own purposes, space, nuclear, etc., you have to then wonder why on earth we are, subsidising its ability to do these things. That's really not a very sensible way for our taxpayers to be spending their money, subsidising countries to go on, kind of vanity projects or, sort of develop very expensive weapons. I think, there does need to be a reckoning about things like this. In fact, we hope there would be a reckoning about things like this when the Department for International Development was actually rolled into the Foreign Office. That was the whole point. The point was to finally make sure that there was a, if you like, a playthrough from British foreign policy objectives into development work as well.
Well, another country that we seem to be giving foreign aid to is China. Now, they did abstain from that vote, so they haven't openly, actively supported Russia, but they've not condemned them either. I mean, what about China? And even before the war, I'm just wondering why we're even putting any money towards China in terms of foreign aid. Do they give us any foreign aid of any description?
Well, the Chinese case is absolutely ridiculous. This is differing funds coming from differing sources. But of course, how can you give money over to one of the almost world, the second world economic superpower? This does seem absolutely ludicrous. And again, it's an example of how we're not getting on top of all our foreign aid spending. We have various different pots that we're sending money out of. Some of them, strict rules have been imposed as to where money can go, but clearly, as in the China example, you're getting money flowing from other departments, and this needs to stop as well.
Well, money flows like water, so it can occupy a different space, and you can't really say, oh, this money's going to that, because once it's all in a pot, then you can't say that bit of the pot came from there. So it's almost a nonsense to say that specifically will go for specific set things, because they might go for other things and it might be different money in that pot. So it doesn't really make much sense to me. But I'm going to say that Britain spent about 14.5 billion on humanitarian assistance, and they reduced the aid. But is there a possibility that they could potentially take away most of that aid and maybe put it back into this country and start putting that money into things like the care sector, because we need aid here?
Well, I think the British people have always recognised there's a value in international aid, and the purpose of it is not simply to put into the wrong pockets, but to actually put into schemes that will make other places less violent, less dangerous, less unstable. The purpose being that if you have instability in these places, that ends up coming to UK shores. It comes to UK shores in the form of migrants, for example, and others who are, kind of leaving a place for a place they see a better economic opportunity. So apart from doing the right thing, because we all believe charity is a good thing. And yes, charity does begin at home, but we do provide lots, obviously, in this country as well. The aid budget is a very small amount compared to domestic spending. There is also always a sense of, let's deal with problems thousands of miles away before they become problems on these shores as well. And that's why we shouldn't get away from the foreign aid game. It's important to be able to help people to be the best versions that they can be in their own countries, rather than having them leave their countries and come here.
Perhaps we should, if it were me and I was doing this, I'd probably halve the entire aid budget, full stop, because 14 billion, that would mean that I could potentially reduce the increase in national insurance for the people in this country, and also perhaps fund some social care, which I think is desperately needed. Would you, in your view, just so your own sort of opinion, do you think that the UK needs to sort of reduce the amount of aid? I know it's obviously we will obviously send some aid to some countries that definitely need it, but do you think that perhaps we're spending too much on this?
No, I don't think we're spending too much. We had a cut, of course, a temporary cut by the government, which I supported at the time because of the exceptional circumstance economically. But I do think foreign aid is a valuable part of what we as a country do. It's part of our soft power. It's part also of our responsibility as a better off nation to others around the world. And like I say, part of the reason that we give foreign aid is to stop problems in other countries from becoming so large that they become insurmountable. Countries break down, there's terrorism, there's violence, people leave, and ultimately people come here. That, what we shouldn't be doing is sort of wanting an unstable world. We should be looking at projects where we can improve stability globally and pick good projects, not bad projects, the kinds that you have highlighted, because those can really make the difference to ordinary people's lives on the ground and make a big difference to the countries who are giving them their ability to actually end up managing a far more stable and prosperous solution for themselves and their citizens.
Well, listen, Alan, thank you very much for talking to me. That's Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society. Thank you for your thoughts. Right, let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. I'm asking, should the UK block foreign aid to countries who support Russia? Violet says, absolutely, the foreign aid should be used to support Ukrainian refugees instead. Thank you. I agree. Dave says, if a country has enough money to have a space programme, we shouldn't be sending them a penny. Fraser says, I had no idea how much we send abroad. Why aren't we spending that on our NHS? That's sadly my view as well. I don't really see why you should be funding things abroad when your own house isn't in order. But if you just join me, it's coming up to 33 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, we'll continue with our Great British debate. And I'm asking, should the UK block foreign aid to countries who support Russia? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, writer and actor Yanis Morgan, and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. And we'll debate whether sport has lost its integrity. Now, there's been controversy in Atlanta after trans swimmer Leah Thomas won a women's 500-yard freestyle event and is dominating the women's game. But before she transitioned, she wasn't even in the top 500 men in the rankings. So is allowing trans athletes to compete in women's sport ruining the art of competition? First, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thank you. It's 5:33. I'm Olivia Guthrie in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's president has compared the Russian invasion of his country with Nazi Germany's final solution to exterminate the Jews. A warning, the video we're about to show you contains flashing images. Hundreds of anti-war protesters gathered outside Israel's Knesset as Volodymyr Zelensky's video address was broadcast to Parliament. He questioned the country's reluctance to sell its missile defence system to help Ukraine and asked why heavy sanctions haven't been imposed against Russia. He told lawmakers that Israel will have to live with its choices. In Ukraine, Mariupol City Council says thousands of people have been taken by force across the border to Russia. Fighting is still said to be ongoing in the city after an art school where around 400 people were taking shelter was also bombed. There's still no word on casualties, but the City Council confirmed the building was destroyed and there were victims under the rubble. In other news, police have arrested 22-year-old Maha Maroof on suspicion of murder following the death of Sabita Tanwani in central London. It's believed the Tunisian national was in a relationship with the 19-year-old. She was found with serious neck injuries at her student accommodation in Clerkenwell yesterday. A woman has been charged with murder after the body of a man was found buried in a back garden in Northampton. Forensic officers and specialist search teams made the discovery during a search of the property. 48-year-old Fiona Beale was arrested at a hotel in Cumbria. She'll appear at Northampton Magistrates Court tomorrow. Conservationists believe a huge fire that devastated a nature reserve on the Wirral was deliberately lit. The Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, which manages the reserve, is assessing the damage. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Nana Akua in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Right, let's get back to our great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, should the UK block foreign aid to countries who support Russia? Now, India and China have been repeatedly asked to distance themselves from Russia after its invasion of Ukraine, but they've yet to do so. But last year, the UK spent £55.3 million to India and £68.4 million to China in foreign aid. India has just taken 3 million barrels of oil from Russia, despite Putin's war, and China are yet to condemn Russia's actions. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, should we block foreign aid to countries who support Russia? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by actor and writer Yanis Morgan and also broadcaster Danny Kelly. Right, so let's see what you think. Danny?
Who are you looking at me? No, I don't think we should have a knee-jerk reaction. I don't think we should. India have bought all of those barrels of oil at a 20% reduction in the price as well. Now, don't forget, India...
Oh, lucky them. Great. Well, I mean, you know...
But just think about it for a second.
Yes.
Just look at it objectively. India's an incredibly poor country, generally speaking. There are people literally sleeping in gutters. They have a terrible sex system, which is so discriminatory. And so there are some people who are living...
Do you think the foreign aid budget gets to those people sleeping in the gutters? Because there's plenty of people sleeping in the gutters in this country. I doubt they get to see any of that.
There aren't people sleeping in the gutters in this country.
You think not?
As compared to the millions. You know, there's 1 billion people in India.
Yeah, but
so
do you think
millions in India.
Do you think a country that spends money on its space projects, they've got money for a space project, hang on, do you think that, seeing as you've got money for a space project, you've got people sleeping in gutters, as you said, there's millions of those people. Do you think that country cares about those people in the gutters and would spend the foreign aid there?
No, I don't think they care about the people in the gutters at all. No. But do you know why they have a space programme? It's not just for a jolly, so that some wealthy Indians can go and walk on the moon. It's to make themselves a bigger and better country in generations to come. It's all to do with satellites, as I understand.
Yeah, but so what? So what? They've got money to spend on that, so why should they be spending? Why should we be sending the money? Yanis?
We're missing the point here, and Dr. Allen touched on something very important about soft power. So the foreign aid budget, so India is, you know, you talk about, there's a high level of poverty, but it's not a poor country. It's actually 7th richest country in the world. It's above Italy. But what we're doing in this foreign aid budget, it's a way of building up relationships for trade. It is a soft power, because really that 55 is a very emotive subject, because we say 55 million and instantly your first reaction is, well, why aren't we spending that here?
On the NHS?
But the foreign aid budget is 0.5% now. Yes, it will have an impact, but that money is actually being used to foster trade relations with China, with India, so it's used in a slightly different way to how we see it.
I hear that, and that's all very well, but what I'm struggling with is that these people are lining themselves up with Vladimir Putin, or still buying his oil, and we are supplying some of that money. So in my view, having looked at their economies, and in particular China, I don't even know why we're sending anything to China, really. I mean, we buy things from China, they've got a fantastic business relationship with them. There's absolutely no justification whatsoever. And talking about soft power, well, I'm just not. I'm not in. I don't believe in it. I think it's an excuse because they don't know how to get out of that. And there's a lot of people.
Trade relations. That's what they're using it for.
Yes, but they will still trade with us whether we give them that or not.
But I'm saying that's the mechanics of because the logistics of it as a country. They're a rich country, so why are we spending that money? But just going on to different points. When you talk about India dictating to them, because they've been neutral, they've had very close relations with Russia for a number of years. I don't think we can turn around and say, we'll only give you this if you agree with us. It's like me giving Danny a gift and saying, Danny, I'm going to give you this gift, but you're not allowed to talk to Nana.
But why are you giving him a gift? What's the point?
Well, it's geopolitics.
Yeah,
may I ask you a question?
I'm not buying into that. For the poorer countries, fine, but not for
May I ask you a question? Because India has just bought 3 million barrels of cut price oil, do you believe that is sufficient for us to cut their foreign aid?
I would have cut it a long time ago.
So what's the difference between Germany buying their gas from Russia and India buying their oil from Russia?
Well, there's totally different things, isn't it?
Why?
Are we giving Germany foreign aid?
No, but what's the difference? Because you're using that as a principle,
Well,
a matter of principle.
I'm just saying, yeah, but my point...
You're saying it's wrong to buy oil, so it's wrong for Germany to buy gas.
Hang on. I've not said it's wrong to buy oil. I'm saying that it's wrong to be giving countries like India and China... Hang on. I've not even... You never let me get to the end of it, and you're about to interrupt. How do you know what I'm going to say? You don't, do you?
I know I do.
No, well, then let me finish, yeah?
I do know it.
OK, because it's not encouraging me to carry on with my point here. So what I'm trying to say to you is, frankly, I don't see why we should be supplying, firstly, these countries the foreign aid in the first place, and secondly, the fact that they are supporting something, in a sense, because if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. They've not condemned it at all. And then, in fact, one of those countries, India, has then gone and bought barrels of oil when the rest of us are all trying to stop. So for me, I'm not comfortable with that, and I don't see why that foreign aid... That's why I'll be looking at that foreign aid budget and saying, well, why am I sending this to that country? Remember, money is fluid. So that money, it might go into the pot of foreign aid, but it can be spent on anything.
It's used to be, you talk about money into a pot. That money, and let's not get fixated, because like you, I hear the 55 million going to India, and I say, India's a rich country, why are we doing it? But if you probe deeper, this money is used to generate more money back to the UK in a very roundabout way. It's not just how you typically see it.
I'm still, again, to put in that money to generate more money, I'm not buying into it. I just simply think that this country do not need foreign aid. Whether it's geopolitics or anything, look at the big picture. The picture is they're extremely wealthy. They don't need it. It's like you're broke and you're going to go, I'll just write you a cheque for this. I'm broke, I haven't got any money, but I'll just write you a cheque anyway, just so you'd be nice to me. No, stop it immediately. For those countries like India and China, this is a really good reasoning why they shouldn't be given it.
If you condemn India for buying oil, you should also condemn Germany for
buying gas. I don't think it's great. I condemn Germany for buying gas,
but it's out of necessity. The Indian people still need oil and gas. They still need to live. It's out of necessity.
That's fine. That's fine. Well, nobody said they shouldn't, but I'm not prepared to be giving foreign aid to those guys, especially on many levels. One, because they're it's a very wealthy country, as Yanis pointed out, even above Italy. And two, because, well, frankly, if they've got money to buy oil at knockdown prices, I'm afraid I don't feel that I should be sending them money. And space stations, they've got a space station.
There's a lot more to the argument. On this occasion, I'm going to have to say I don't agree with you.
I don't mind. You're entitled to disagree with me. I'll just have to eject you off the seat.
Just think of it as...
I thought nobody was cancelled on the show.
Just think of it as
just get ejected.
Dragon's Den. Just think of Dragon's Den for a second.
Okay.
You're investing in a future India that is going to be better for the planet because people aren't going to be desperate to come over here. Just remember what the Alan Jackson
How is it going to be better for the planet? They're even buying fossil fuel.
Foreign aid isn't about going to space. It's about keeping Indians in India and keeping Somalians in Somalia.
No,
this is what the
I understand the premise that foreign aid is trying to be civil and trying to help the world and trying to keep those countries good, but they have enough money to do it themselves.
In certain countries, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what the foreign aid budget is for. Countries like India and China, the foreign aid budget is more of soft power and it's a nuance to build relationships.
We don't really have power in these countries. I think we're deluding ourselves, but this show is nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome on our Great British Voice your opportunity to be on the show. Tell us your view on the topics that we're discussing. I'm going to say welcome to Dan. He's there in Hull. Dan, thank you for joining us. Now, do you think we should block foreign aid to countries who support Russia?
Asking the question like that, and it's a fantastic debate, I can see why the answers are absolutely yes, we should be blocking it, and the public would agree with you if these countries are already rich enough. But Yanis is trying to picture a bigger picture, and that is it is about soft power in a world that is now changing. America is no longer the global power it used to be. And what is happening is an alliance between India, Russia and China. And once India and China sort out the border issues that they've got and they come to some agreement, then we're going to have a new global superpower on our hands. And if we're not at that debating table, if we somehow have taken our toys and our bat and ball and gone home, then we're going to be at a serious disadvantage. And I think we need to be looking at the bigger picture rather than just debating whether or not we should be sending 55 million quid to an already rich country. I mean, we send it to China as well. We need to be at that debating table, and that, going forward, is a serious problem because our financial system is on its knees and there is a new order coming.
And you think 55 million will buy it? Listen, Dan, thank you so much for your view. I appreciate that. That's Dan Bryan. He's there. He's our GB voice. He's a hairdresser, and that's his view. Well, I hear what he's saying, and he makes a good point. But I just simply think that they don't need the money. They shouldn't be sent it, and I'm not buying into this soft power idea. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Harold says China have the second largest economy in the world. The fact that we're sending them money makes me feel like an idiot. Absolutely, it makes us all look really stupid. Why would why would you give? You're broke and you're writing checks. It makes no sense. Let's see what Ian says. Ian says foreign aid is hugely important for less developed nations. We have a duty to help them, but we should stop sending it to those who choose to do business with Russia. Again, I agree with you. It's like a sanction. Why should we be sending it to them? And those countries are richer than us. Colin said it is absurd to give aid to countries on the basis of we've always done it. Absolutely. Some of them are better off than the UK and misuse the funding for personal gain. Yeah, we'll keep your thoughts coming. It's always great to hear your views. We know what the panel think. Keep your views coming. But, well, I've got a hugely important question to ask you, and it's one about sport. We've been watching it on the TV all the time, and we're seeing a lot of the things that a lot of us feel is nonsense. But do you think that sport has now lost its integrity when swimmer Leah Thomas competed as a man before her transition 2 years ago? In the ratings, she was outside the top 500. But this week, she won the women's 500-yard freestyle event in Atlanta and is dominating the women's game. So I'm asking, is allowing trans athletes to compete in women's sport ruining the art of competition? Right, so I'm going to start with you. Yanis, your view on that?
Yeah, I think it is. Ultimately, the way forward, personally, I feel there needs to be a category. So if you're in that position, because you have got the benefit, and I know on previous show they were talking about this, the fact that puberty, the massive advantage puberty gives you, you've still got, even if you take drugs to reduce your testosterone, the latent strength of your physiology and your muscle structure. So there has to be a subcategory. So anyone who is in that group maybe compete against themselves so it's fair, but you can't compare someone who's born biologically a woman with a man who's trans.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. What do you think?
Of course, it's ruining the sport. It must be so distressing for young female athletes. I mean, I look at Leah Thomas on the telly and I see a bloke with long hair. I'm sorry to be blunt, but the physiology is of a bloke. It looks like a pub doorman. And so you are going to have those natural...
You're going
to have those natural physiological advantages.
Well, yeah,
of course you are.
I mean, obviously, we're not commenting on her actual, as how she looks, whether she looks nice or not. The point is that what Danny is saying is that she looks like she's a man. Well, she does.
No,
I agree with that.
We have to be really conscious of the fact not to portion any blame to her, because we've got to respect the fact of how she feels and how she identifies, and I feel strongly on that. So she was born into a man's body, but she's a woman and she feels that way. Equally, there has to be a fair playing field. So I think if you had a category, a sporting event, where it was for trans, then it's fair.
There's going to be about 8 people at this Trans Olympics.
Okay, to start with. I'm not saying Olympics, but just if you're competing. I think
there's going to be hardly anyone there, Yanis.
Well, that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. You know what I mean? I don't look. We have the Paralympics so that we can level people with different abilities, so that it's more acceptable for them. It's more fair on them. It's no point. Actually, some of the Paralympians would do a lot better than some of the able-bodied athletes in many things, to be fair. But we try and make sure that it's fair for those competing. What I'm seeing is that women don't appear to be consulted on this. Who's made that decision? If that were me, I would say, I'm sorry, but this person, whilst they may feel that they are a woman biologically, because this is what it is, we're comparing bodies, as it were, biologically this person is male, and therefore it is totally unfair to women for this person to compete.
Even the Paralympics have come in for criticism because you have different levels of ability.
Yeah.
You have different disabilities, and they all dive into the same swimming pool.
It's like boxing and weight category.
Yeah,
so if you've got, Leah is she's 6'4", and say her hands and feet a lot bigger, so it gives her more pull and drag in the water. So she's got a major physiological advantage over the biological women.
But that ain't fair, surely.
That's not fair.
I totally agree with you guys. That's not fair.
It's totally ridiculous. If I think the women should have just refused to compete, only because there's no point. There's no point in them competing. She was always going to win. Leah Thomas was always going to win, and they knew that. So there's literally no point getting in the water, is there? How demoralising! You've worked all your life to try and be a fit, strong, sporting person. You're there. You're at the top of your game, and then some guy then decides he's a woman, competes in your.
No, he doesn't decide she's a woman.
Hang on, wait a minute. When I say no, but you can decide that you can gender identify.
I know, but it's very flippant the way your delivery.
Yeah, but that's not an insult, is it? That person may have decided that they feel like they're a woman. It's a fact, isn't it?
But this is why we shouldn't apportionate any blame to her. I think
no one's apportioning blame. We're just saying it's unfair to the women. Right, it's time for Supplement Sunday. I'm getting annoyed with this one. So we're going to discuss some of the day's other stories that my panel have found. So I'm with broadcaster Danny Kelly and actor and writer Yanis Morgan. I think it's just typical that when you speak about it, people think you're trying to apportion blame when you're just seeing it from your own perspective.
No, I didn't see blame.
You did.
No, I didn't.
No. Well, Yanis did.
Yanis, I can see Yanis.
Well, no one said that you said it. I was just talking.
I wasn't apportioning blame.
Well, no one's. But you don't need to answer. Don't answer. Right, let's get on with it.
Who do you want to talk?
See what you started. Well, you talk about what you want to talk about.
I've got a couple of stories I was going to mention.
Go for it.
Go on, get on with it.
Okay, all right. The big one. Well, not the big one, but it was an interesting story. So, when is honesty too much honesty? So, there was a man on Reddit. He was anonymous, and he posted the question saying, "Was he too honest?" Because he saw a video on TikTok. And there was a couple, and they were saying, would I change? So let's say Danny and I were together, saying, would I change anything about you, Danny? Frankly, I wouldn't, and that's what the couple said on TikTok.
Yep.
He tried to do the same experiment with his girlfriend of 4 years. She turned around and said, the only thing I'll change about you is you can be a bit too anxious sometimes, and I just want to alleviate the stress in your life. So that was her comment. When she flipped it around on him, he was possibly a little bit too honest.
What did he say?
I felt you're too hairy in parts on your face and your arms.
Thank God you qualified that.
I wish that your body was more of like when it was before the pandemic, because you're more muscular and a little bit thinner. I mean, this was very, very raw. She got upset by this.
She would do it.
But the final twist is they didn't speak for a day. I think she locked herself in the room. The next day she turned around and said, well, actually, I did have stuff I wanted to say about you, but I didn't want to hurt your feelings. And if it's truthful, I wish that you followed my skincare regime because you got too many spots. And I wish you came to the gym with me because you're not in shape. He then got offended at that. But the question is honesty too? Is there a point where you can be too honest?
Are they still together?
No, they're not.
So.
And he did a follow-up and said they're not.
Danny, briefly, you've got.
OK, Cher, the superstar, very wealthy woman, blasts celebrities for not stepping up as she offers her home to Ukrainian refugees. This is what we touched on earlier. Yeah. The biggest mouthpieces on radio and TV who slam anyone who voted Brexit as being racist and xenophobic, and they're slamming the government the way that the visa scheme is being rolled out. Do they open their doors? Do these big-mouthed radio and telepresenters open their doors to Ukrainians?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Well, listen, on today's show, we've been asking, is nuclear power the way forward? And according to our Twitter poll, 90% of you say yes. 10% of you say no. That's surprising to me. Well, I've got to say thank you so much to my panel, broadcaster Danny Kelly and actor and writer Yanis Morgan for joining me today. And thank you to you for your company. I shall see you next week, same time, same place.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking dry and clear for many, though it will chill off after sunset. Let's take a look at the details. Firstly, in the far southwest, there'll be some more cloud around here this evening, and perhaps even the odd spot of rain, but that cloud will keep temperatures up. Over to the east, and a clear, calmer end to the weekend, though in any rural areas it will start to feel pretty chilly around dusk. Moving back to the west, and in South Wales, there'll continue to be hardly a cloud in the sky tonight, chilly here as well. Next now to the Midlands, where you can see the odd spot of fog and mist developing this evening, but otherwise a clear and cool end to the day after a sunny-filled weekend. Now moving further east, and there will be more cloud across northeast England this evening, and in coastal areas a chance of some very light rain, though inland it will also be pretty chilly. Whizzing over to Scotland now, chilly here, especially in the breeze, but staying clear and dry for all, with some mistiness developing at low levels. Finally, we go to Northern Ireland, where it has been a little cloudier so far today, and this evening it will remain mostly cloudy, but that does mean it won't feel too cold. By Monday morning, temperatures will have dipped across the UK, so it will be a clear and crisp start to the week, and that is how the weather is shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.